So, how's your studying going?
Oh, pretty good. I'm just plugging away at my cross-reference list. It sure is long, but I think I'm getting the hang of it.
Yeah, you know you're supposed to study the super senior cross-references, right?
No, what's that?
So all the agers have to study the super senior cross-reference list, which is like twice as long as the normal cross-reference list. And for context, you have to study at least like 30 chapters before and after. And it's gonna be like 60% of the qualifying test instead of 30, which is for like non-agers.
How are we gonna do that? No, no, no! Oh, thank goodness. It was just a dream. Just a dream. Boy, how many more of these can I take? When's the qualifying test? Hi, my name is Anna Northcutt. I've completed the National Bible Bee Summer Study 9 times, and I've advanced to the National Competition 8. If you guessed that we're going to be talking about cross-references today, then you are correct. But before we start, if you haven't already downloaded the official Bible Bee cross-reference list from your Bible Bee dashboard, definitely do that. Bible Bee usually releases the cross-reference list about halfway through the summer study, so if you're watching this in 2023, it came out a few weeks ago. Any other year, I have no idea. Okay, now let's start. Okay, starting off with a lesson in Bible Beer slang.
It's where NBB HQ sends you a DJ, and you have to study it along with all the CRs, MPs, GWs, and SP as a part of the SS.
Among Bible Beers, cross-references are most commonly abbreviated CRs, but if you want to be all counterculture, you can say CFs. I'm just kidding. I actually called them CFs once without thinking about it, and my friend innocently observed, "Oh, so you're one of those people who say CFs instead of CRs," and I never did it again. Regardless of what you call them, I feel like cross-references are probably one of the most foreign concepts for first-time Bible beers, so let's start off with a definition.
Cross-references are passages outside of the study passage or verses that correlate somehow to the study passage.
And in my personal experience, Bible Bee does define somehow pretty loosely, so you could have a cross-reference that correlates to a theme from the study passage, or a cross-reference to a memory passage, or something like that. But pro tip, if you can't remember how a cross-reference was supposed to connect to the study passage, a really easy way to find it is to keyword search the PDF answer anchor for the Discovery Journal. Now, before I turn it over to my friends, I just wanted to bring up those passages in the Discovery Journal that seem important but aren't on the official cross-reference list that the Bible Bee releases. A good example of these would be the end-of-unit mini-studies on Proverbs 31 in the 2022 Discovery Journal. What I've understood about these is that they can be just as important as cross-references in terms of knowing content and how they connect to the study passage, and Bible Bee will put them on the qualifying test as part of the 60% Discovery Journal content category, but you don't have to study them in context, meaning knowing what happens in the surrounding verses, whereas Bible Bee can test on context for the official cross-reference list cross-references. It's hard to say. Of course, whether you should study cross-reference context at all is a pretty debated topic that I think I'm going to save for another video, but for the moment, just remember that while cross-reference context may or may not be something you really need to study in order to qualify, cross-references definitely are, and as far as I remember, pretty much everyone I interviewed agreed with me on that.
Cross-references are usually the thing that separates the qualifiers from everyone else.
Cross-references are usually a pretty big chunk of the test, like a third of it.
Cross-references are the questions that kind of thin out people.
Especially on the senior level. That's the thing. I feel like a lot of people have a good grasp on the Discovery Journal and the memory passages. So I feel like the cross-reference really comes down to who qualifies.
Say there's 30 questions on cross-references and you miss them all because you didn't study them, then you can only get 70% maximum. So you might still qualify with that, but yeah, you don't want to take chances.
Okay, so now that I've scared myself into studying cross-references, let's go over some ideas for how to study them. Looking back on it, I think something I wish I had done more in past years was focus more on cross-reference summaries rather than trying to read through all my cross-references every day, because that was so time-consuming I would just procrastinate on it endlessly and end up not studying them at all. whereas summaries are very manageable time-wise, and they're also highly effective according to plenty of successful Bible beers.
If you know it word for word, I mean, it's obviously better, but I don't think that's really they're not gonna get down to the nitty-gritty words of the cross-references.
I really don't think it's that important to know it word for word. And if you did need to know it word for word, you could probably figure it out just by knowing the summary.
I felt like it was kind of helpful to also comprehend what the verse is, rather than just reciting it word for word. And that would help it stick in my memory better too, because then I kind of understood why it, correlated with the study passage.
We study the full thing. We don't memorize it. But when we're working on recall, we work from a summary or a key phrase.
I think if I had time, sometimes I would go back and read them, word for word, just like maybe once through before the test, just to get them, just kind of remind myself of like what they're actually saying and stuff. But usually, again, I wouldn't quite be probably focused enough or have enough time to study them in their entirety.
Usually I do learn them again in their context to the Discovery Journal, because that most likely they're not going to be quizzing you really hard on the exact wording of a cross-reference, but they'll be using it and how does it relate to the study passage or what we were studying in the Discovery Journal.
I use summaries. Like some people memorize them word for word, which is great, but I don't think I've ever tried that, and I think it would be pretty hard, along with all the memory passages that you have to memorize.
And so you have all these people saying, it's not important to know the exact wording of a cross-reference. And then in typical Bible beer fashion, you have people who say just the opposite.
Summaries is usually should be enough, but memorizing CRs is definitely a good way to have them down.
So if it's one or two verses, then I try to know it perfectly.
Sometimes they can be very specific with the questions that they ask about them.
Half of the questions you could probably answer just by summary. The other half, I feel like they do ask very specific details. Sometimes I know they've asked like what color was, the robe that someone wore. So I guess if your summaries are really detailed, you might be able to get away with that. For me though, it was just faster to memorize it.
And Kaylee made a perfect score on the qualifying test in 2022, so obviously that strategy really worked for her. I did want to replay this part of her clip though.
I guess if your summaries are really detailed, you might be able to get away with that.
Okay, so if your summaries are detailed enough, it's fine. Question, what constitutes a really detailed summary? Most helpful answer I could come up with. I don't think there is an answer. One thing that a lot of people I talked to did point out, however, is that it can be helpful to write two summaries for the cross-reference, and the first one will be about the theme or idea that links the cross-reference to the Discovery Journal or study passage, and another one that just focuses on what takes place in the passage. And that way you'll be prepared for the classic Bible Bee cross-reference question like, which of the following verses best cross-references John 1:1? But you'll also be prepared for the how well do you know your cross-reference questions, such as, in Daniel 7:13-14, what was given to the Son of Man? But I think you've been hearing from me for long enough at this point, so I'm just going to let my friends share how they study cross-references using everything from flashcards to chocolate chips.
I'll probably for those go through and make like a Google Doc first, like with the cross-reference, how it relates, context, all that. And then from there, I'll put it in the Quizlet set.
I have like documents of the different cross-references separated by Discovery Journal sections. And then I go through them and I know I'm kind of jumping ahead in your questions here, but I go through and read through the cross-references and highlight the important parts.
Highlighters.
Highlighter?
Highlighting. Highlight.
I don't like memorize them like I do with the memory passages. I just kind of read through them continually, and then I guess so I have a pretty good, maybe not know word perfect, but yeah, basically know all the important parts.
I will pull up my Word doc of what I usually do for cross-references. One sec.
A few moments later.
I have to scroll through every single Bible Bee Word doc I've ever made.
Many unbearable hours later.
Okay, so this is from 2021.
Oh, do I need to give you permission to screen share?
Yeah, you do.
How do I do that?
One eternity later.
So before I start, I should say I did not come up with this. I got this idea in like 2019, I think, from someone who's done Bible Bee for like a really, really long time. So this is not my idea. but here's what I do. So I write the reference at the top, and then I write the verse, and then this is a summary, this is context, and this is how it's used in the DJ, which I think is really important to know because that's like what they're meaning it to be. Because usually the DJ will use it in like its own separate way for like background or whatever. And then at the bottom, I have what page, like where in the DJ it's found. And then, yeah, I do that for every single cross-reference.
Our biggest success with cross-references in review is to play bingo. My kids really love this because we'll use M&Ms or chocolate chips or whatever, right? Like to mark their spot. And I will write questions that say, which cross-reference mentions. So I will write at least one question like that for every cross-reference.
Okay, I really need to get on convincing my mom to do this, but if you want to hear more about cross-reference studying from the Chu family, there's an awesome article on their blog, studyforbibleB.blogspot.com, which I will try to remember to link down below. Future Anna, do not forget to link it down below.
For the Hebrew words and cross-references, I'll have like a sheet of lined paper. So just normally, like normal paper from a notebook, and then I'll fold it in half and I'll tear it. If you look at this, this is what happens. This is the one half of the sheet folded over, and then you cut them up along the lines, and you'll have that, and then you can open it up. It's kind of like, it helps randomize things, kind of like Quizlet can do.
For cross-references, I didn't start studying until I got to the point where they were in the Discovery Journal, and then I would write down in my notebook a little note, usually just a summary of the verse on one line of notebook paper, and it was really crammed, but my handwriting improved a lot.
Okay, so apparently notebook paper is what the cool kids are using today.
Again, I probably should have written them out, but Gimkit. So I started out doing it, reading it through, and then like doing it with Gimkit and the whole big, cross-reference. Then once I got a feel for it, and once people stopped playing my Gimkits because they were all on KJV, then I started doing summaries.
How dare they? I am offended. I will add though, I interviewed Reed in March, and since then I believe he stopped playing Gimkit because of their stance on a current moral issue. Obviously a lot of people still play it, and I'm not condemning anyone for that. I just wanted to clarify about Reed that even though he recommended it back then, he's not using it anymore.
I will typically either print them off of someone else's KJV Quizlet set or write them down. And I don't like sitting down and studying. So I will walk in my neighborhood and I'll have flashcards and I'll just go through them. And what I'll usually do is on one side, I'll have the reference and then the verse. So I'll look at the reference, and if I can basically just summarize it in my own head and then flip it over and it's essential, like I got the essential points, then that's how I usually study it.
Cross-references are definitely important for the test, but also I found them to be very, very spiritually edifying. I don't usually memorize them word for word unless they're short, then it kind of happens without me thinking about it. So I will write them on flashcards, and if it's short, then I'll write the whole verse. If it's not, I'll just write a summary, and whatever I put on there, I end up memorizing.
It kind of depends on the cross-reference. So if it's one or two verses, then I try to know it perfectly. But then if it's like, I think one year maybe the whole chapter of Genesis 3 was a cross-reference. So I didn't go memorize all of that.
If the cross-reference was 5 verses or less, then I memorized it pretty word for word. If I was messing up a few words, I didn't worry about it. So I didn't like memorize it to the same level as like the memory passage, but I did try to basically have it word for word. If it was more than 5 verses, I just summarized it the best that I could, with a good amount of detail that I would be able to answer a question on it, but not trying to get word for word.
I felt super blessed to be able to interview Kaylee. In case you didn't already know this, she's actually on the alumni service team this year. But one of my favorite questions I got to ask her was, what was something that really stood out to you after 5 years of participating and competing in the Bible Bee? And she just gave this awesome answer. I love how you could ask Bible Beers the most cliche questions, and then they'll give you the most interesting and unique responses.
It just really amazed me, the God's sovereignty of He can take a passage and He can make it like be so edifying to 120 people in 120 different ways. And I think that is so amazing and such a testament of God's sovereignty and his goodness to us.